I never imagined that the people I loved the most would be the very ones to try and steal my sanity and my freedom. My own family, those I trusted blindly, orchestrated a cruel plan to commit me to a mental institution. The reason? My inheritance. I was terrified. My sanity was questioned with every glance. My future seemed stolen, and the betrayal was a suffocating, agonizing weight on my soul. It was a living nightmare, and I was trapped in it. If you've ever felt betrayed by those you least expected, or if you enjoy stories of triumph where justice prevails, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and tell me in the comments what city in the United States you're listening from. I'm Sarah Miller, and this is my story. They didn't know it, but I had a secret weapon, a video diary documenting their every cruel move, every treacherous whisper. My terror would transform into a brilliant public exposé. My life was relatively simple before all this. I, Sarah Miller, a 35-year-old visual artist, lived in a charming apartment in Brooklyn, New York, dedicating myself to my passion. My great-aunt, Carol, an eccentric and wonderful woman who resided in a small, picturesque town in Vermont, had always been my biggest supporter. She had no children and, to everyone's surprise, left her entire fortune and her historic country home to me in her will. The inheritance was substantial, over $5 million, in addition to the property valued at another $1 million. My Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, and Aunt Carol's only direct relative besides me, had always considered himself the natural heir. He, along with his wife, Aunt Susan, and their daughter, my cousin Emily, had always been cordial, but there was a latent tension, especially after the will was read. They congratulated me with forced smiles, but I could feel the resentment bubbling beneath the surface. Robert, a failed businessman, saw the inheritance as his last chance to get back on his feet, and Aunt Carol, in her wisdom, knew he would squander it. She chose me because she trusted that I would use the money for something meaningful, perhaps to open my own art studio, a long-held dream. In the days following the will reading, my family's cordiality began to unravel. Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan, who barely visited me before, became constant presences. Their visits, however, were not supportive, but invasively curious. They questioned my every decision, every small expense. "Sarah, are you sure you can manage all this on your own? It's a lot of money, dear," Aunt Susan would say with a tone of false concern. Robert, for his part, tried to convince me to invest in his dubious businesses. Subtle comments began to surface about my fragility and excessive sensitivity. If I forgot something, it was a sign of stress. If I expressed a strong emotion, it was an imbalance. They twisted my words, made me doubt my own memory. "You don't remember saying that, Sarah? Your memory's been failing lately, dear," Susan would say with a condescending smile. Slowly, I began to feel isolated. They discouraged my friendships, suggesting they were bad influences. Paranoia began to set in. I remembered a documentary about a victim who documented her own story. I decided to buy a small, discreet camera. It became my only confidant, recording every conversation, every glance, every whisper that made me question my own sanity. The atmosphere in my own home, my sanctuary in Brooklyn, became suffocating. Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan, with their increasingly invasive presence, turned every interaction into a veiled interrogation. They not only questioned my financial decisions, but began to undermine my confidence in every aspect of my life. If I mentioned a new art project, Robert would frown and say, "Sarah, don't you think you're overdoing it? Your mind needs a rest." Aunt Susan, with her sweet smile and icy eyes, would add, "Yes, dear, you seem a little scattered lately. Perhaps a long vacation, away from everything, would do you good." Their tactic was clear: gaslighting. They twisted my words, invented conversations we never had, and made me doubt my own memory. "You don't remember agreeing to sell the Vermont house, Sarah? We talked about it last week," Robert would say, with a conviction that almost made me believe him. I felt like I was losing control of reality. My friendships, once a safe haven, were subtly sabotaged. They would call my friends, expressing concern for my well-being, suggesting I was going through a tough time and needed space. Soon the calls dwindled, the invitations ceased. I was isolated, vulnerable. The last straw came during a forced family dinner. Emily, my cousin, whom I had always considered an ally, began to parrot her parents' phrases. "Sarah, you're acting so erratically. Mom and Dad are worried you're not taking care of yourself." In that moment, as they watched me with a mix of pity and satisfaction, a cold clarity hit me. They weren't worried. They were breaking me. That's when I remembered a documentary about a woman who, trapped in an abusive relationship, secretly filmed her abuser to prove her sanity. The idea of a video diary, irrefutable proof of my reality, ignited a spark of hope. That same night, under the guise of buying art supplies, I acquired a small, high-definition camera, discreet enough to fit in the palm of my hand. It became my silent confidant, the only place where I could truly be myself, recording every glance, every whisper, every manipulation that made me question my own sanity. I would no longer be a passive victim. The camera, hidden in a plant pot in the living room or disguised as a decorative object in my office, became my secret eyes and ears. I activated it whenever Robert, Susan, or Emily were around, especially when the conversation turned to the inheritance or my mental health. The recordings were tedious at first, full of mundane conversations and subtle manipulations, but I persisted, driven by an instinct for self-preservation. The shocking revelation came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had gone out for a walk to clear my mind, as Susan had suggested, but in reality, I was just circling the block to activate the recording and return. Upon my return, I heard muffled voices coming from my office. They thought I was still out. The camera was on. Through the crack in the door, I saw Robert, Susan, and Emily gathered, papers spread across my desk. Dr. Peterson said that with the report Susan prepared and Emily's testimony about her erratic behavior, it will be easy to get the commitment order, Robert said, his voice low and calculating. Once she's in there, we'll have full access to the assets and can manage the inheritance for her benefit, of course. My heart froze. Commitment. They were planning to lock me up in a mental institution. Emily, my cousin, added, "And the best part is, she's giving us the evidence herself. Her obsession with filming everything. We can just say it's a symptom of her paranoia. No one will believe her." The coldness in their voices, the way they discussed my future as if I were an object, filled me with a rage I had never felt before. They were forging medical reports, manipulating testimonies, and using my own attempt at self-defense against me. The shock was overwhelming, but the rage gave me clarity. My terror transformed into an unwavering determination. I had the proof. I had the video diary. And they would pay for every second of anguish they caused me. With the raw truth in my hands, I knew a confrontation was inevitable. They were accelerating their plan, and I needed to be one step ahead. I decided to create the crisis they so eagerly anticipated, but on my own terms. The next day, I sent a message to Robert and Susan, telling them I was feeling very confused and needed their help to organize my thoughts about the inheritance. The bait was taken. They arrived at my house with expressions of false concern, accompanied by Emily, who carried a folder with what I knew were the forged reports. The camera was strategically positioned, capturing every angle of the room. I sat on the couch, feigning a fragility that churned my stomach. "I don't know what's happening to me," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "I feel like I'm losing control. Maybe you're right. Maybe I need help." Robert and Susan exchanged a triumphant glance. "Of course, dear," Susan said. sitting beside me and taking my hand. "We only want what's best for you. Dr. Peterson is a specialist. He'll help you recover." Robert, with a patronizing tone, added, "It's for your own good, Sarah. Think about your health, your stability. Once you're better, we can take care of everything for you." Emily, with an almost imperceptible smile, opened the folder and began to flip through the papers. "Here are the documents, Sarah. It's just a standard procedure. You just need to sign here, and they'll pick you up tomorrow morning." She handed me a pen. I looked at the document, which was a compulsory commitment order. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a cold anticipation. As they watched me, confident in their victory, I lifted the camera, which was hidden under a cushion, and pointed it directly at them. "You think I'm crazy?" My voice came out firm, without a hint of the fragility I had feigned. "Because I'm not, and I have the proof." The shock on their faces was priceless. Robert paled, Susan let out a muffled gasp, and Emily dropped the folder, scattering the forged documents across the floor. The crucial recording was made. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening, broken only by the sound of the camera recording. Robert, Susan, and Emily were paralyzed, their faces contorted in a mixture of shock, fear, and disbelief. What is that, Sarah?" stammered Robert, pointing at the camera as if it were a weapon. "This," I replied, my voice now laced with cold calculation, "is the proof. The proof that you are not the concerned angels you pretend to be, but greedy manipulators who tried to commit me to steal my inheritance." Susan tried to compose herself, forcing a nervous smile. "Sarah, dear, don't be so dramatic. It's just a camera. You're stressed, we understand." But I gave them no room for more lies. Stressed? Me? Or you, who were caught red-handed planning to lock me up in a psychiatric hospital? I played a segment of the recording where Robert spoke about the commitment order and Emily about how my filming would be used against me. Their voices echoed through the room, cold and calculating, exposing the truth of their intentions. Emily, who had been in shock until then, exploded. "You can't do that. That's illegal. You're defaming us." I laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh. "Defamation? You tried to destroy my life, my reputation, my sanity. I have the right to defend myself. And don't worry, I won't just defame you. I will expose every detail of your cruel plan to the world." The threat was real, and they knew it. Panic began to take over their eyes. Robert tried to approach, but I stepped back. "Don't you dare touch me. From now on, our communication will only be through my lawyers." They left my house in disarray, the image of their defeat forever etched in my camera. The battle was far from over, but the first and most important victory was mine. The truth was revealed, and I had the evidence. My brilliant and public exposé didn't take long to happen. With the help of a lawyer specializing in manipulation and financial abuse cases, who became interested in my case due to the clarity of the video evidence, we devised a strategy. Instead of a silent legal battle, we opted for an approach that would maximize visibility and poetic justice. I didn't just want my money back. I wanted the truth about their greed and cruelty to be known. The video diary, edited to highlight the most incriminating moments, was the centerpiece. We released a short documentary titled The Inheritance Trap on a popular streaming platform and my social media. The story of a woman who, after inheriting a fortune, becomes the target of a diabolical plan by her own family to be committed, with video evidence, went viral in a matter of hours. The media, hungry for real and shocking stories, picked up the case. I was invited to television shows in New York and Los Angeles, gave interviews to major newspapers and magazines. Sarah Miller's story, the artist who unmasked her family, was everywhere. The public reaction was overwhelming. Thousands of messages of support flooded my social media. People shared their own experiences of abuse and manipulation, finding strength in my story. Robert, Susan and Emily were publicly humiliated. Robert's already struggling business collapsed. Susan was fired from her position at a charity organization, and Emily, who worked at an advertising agency, lost her job and her reputation. The social and legal pressure became unbearable for them. Dr. Peterson, the complicit doctor, had his license suspended and is under investigation. The inheritance, which they so coveted, became the instrument of their own ruin. Justice, to my surprise and relief, was not only legal, but also moral and public. The dust settled, but the scars remained. The inheritance was secured, and the Vermont house, now a symbol of resilience, became my new home and studio. I used part of the money to create a foundation that supports emerging artists and provides resources for victims of financial abuse and family manipulation. My story, which began as a nightmare, transformed into a platform to help others. Robert, Susan, and Emily tried to apologize, but their words sounded hollow, devoid of any genuine remorse. They were sorry for the consequences, not for their actions. I cut all ties. True family, I realized, is not defined by blood, but by loyalty, respect, and unconditional love. My friends, who had drifted away, returned, embarrassed for having fallen for Robert and Susan's manipulation. I forgave them, understanding that they too were victims of a cruel plan. Today, my life is fulfilling. My art flourishes like never before, inspired by my journey and the strength I discovered within myself. The house in Vermont, with its green hills and fresh air, is a constant reminder that, even in the worst adversities, the truth always finds its way. Aunt Carol's inheritance was not just financial. It was the lesson that character is worth more than any fortune, and that the greatest wealth is integrity. Their cruel plan spectacularly backfired, and I, Sarah Miller, not only survived but thrived, proving that a person's sanity and dignity are invaluable. And that, my friends, is my true inheritance.